welcome everybody to the Too High Podcast. I am your host, Seth Galina, alongside the other host of the Too High Podcast, Mr. Diante Lee. Diante, what's going on?
Not much, man. On my parenting grind. My little one's got a fever, so, I'm just trying to get through. That is the best way I can put it.
Hopefully little Braxton gets better. I don't have to deal with any of that. I have no responsibilities in my life other than to record podcasts. So
and I'm trying to keep it that way. Keep it that way, bro.
All right, so it is our second podcast of the week, which means we are going to preview the Sunday night football game, which unfortunately was already a weird matchup, and it got even weirder with Russell Wilson's injury last Thursday night against the Los Angeles Rams. We get the Seahawks, and we get them in Pittsburgh. But I do think both offenses, from my perspective, the offenses, and you'll talk a bit more about the defenses. I think there's obviously a lot of every NFL team has an interesting feature to talk about, and even without Russell Wilson, even with the bad play of Ben Roethlisberger over the past 2 years, I think there's still some interesting things to talk about. So let's start with the Seahawks defense, actually, because this is something that you watched and you said, hey, maybe Pete Carroll, the Legion of Boom era is officially dead. They're getting back into some of the stuff that you noted to me that Pete Carroll was doing back in the day at USC. So can you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, so basically, again, don't want to overrepresent anything because cover three is obviously still a big piece of what they do. It's a big piece of what everybody does. But what they are getting back into is a little bit more of the Tampa 2 stuff that Pete really ran when he first started at USC, or when he had Monty Kiffin. So when things started taking off at USC, and really the big difference in that, aside from the coverage shell and the way that you deal with certain routes, is how you fit the run, right? So in a cover 3 world, everybody's got one gap. So everybody's playing downhill. In the Tampa 2 world, you kind of have to do things differently on both levels, both on the first and second level of the defense. So your defensive line have to play in what's called heavy techniques, meaning that they're basically almost striking down the middle of offensive linemen. It's not necessarily a 2 gap. It's almost the best way I can describe it is being a judo wrestler, right? Where wherever the offensive lineman is going, you're just trying to eat up as much space as possible in that direction. So you're just trying to kind of gum up the front. And then the linebackers, the goal, because your middle linebacker also has to be the guy who runs the pole, meaning that he becomes that deep hole player. In Tampa 2, you don't want him to have to fit a gap downhill, right? That's way too much conflict to create for a defensive player. So what you do with your strong side and weak side backers is they basically have to play, almost like a gap and a half, the way that we've talked about with Brandon Staley, in the way that some of these 3-4 guys teach their defensive linemen, where guys are going to play a gap based on the flow of the backfield. So if the ball's coming to me, I'm going to fit this gap. If the ball's flowing away, I'm a cutback player. So I have a gap. I'm kind of covering for the Mike backer so you can stay over the top. And that's really what's been most interesting to me. So it's almost like fitting the run like cover 0, where you've got a bunch of extra run fitters, right? So, and if that's the way that you're fitting the run, you want to keep a guy free by using your overhangs to kind of cancel out what gaps may still exist. So that's the number one thing that really stood out to me. And then from the coverage perspective, playing cover 4, which is obviously just a zone version of playing cover 0, in my opinion. And then, Tampa 2, which fits like cover 0 in the run game. So you're able to do some different things to 3x1 and stuff like that. So that era that we've talked about a bunch, where you got linebackers who are wheeling out underneath the verticals and from number 3 and trips, you don't see it as much. Obviously they can still do it. I think that, you and I have had separate conversations with some other guys who watch the Seahawks closely about some of the athletic slippage from guys like Bobby Wagner. And it is kind of evident when you watch it on film. I saw a lot of it playing the Rams, and obviously the Rams are a much more vertical offense than a lot of others, but it was still pretty striking to see that Bobby can't really get underneath some of these vertical routes as well as he used to be able to. So that's why, I think that's also another reason why I think the cover 4 stuff is more prevalent in their defense now. Not only are they trying to get away from the Legion of Boom stuff, but I think that they're trying to take a little bit off of the plate of their Hall of Fame linebacker as well.
My mom put me in judo class when I was 6 years old. and I threw up halfway through. That's the first memory. To answer your question about two-gapping, I threw up when I was 6 years old. Yeah, I think the Bobby stuff is really, it sucks because Bobby has been such a good player for so long. And then when you see how the Seahawks are playing and how they're having their linebackers pick up vertical routes, which was always something that the Seahawks and Bobby and KJ for that matter too did so well, you're looking at it, it's like, who's the guy who is having to do all that stuff now? It's Jordan Brooks, who's a young player who I think we both like, but at the same time, you're replacing KJ and Bobby's abilities there with a second year player who, those two are Hall of Famers. So like that's been really tough. Yeah, I think the defense. I think you understand why they've just finally been like, all right, I think this is just, we got to do something else here. And then it goes back into the issue, which is like, I don't know if the defense is just good enough right now, like player-wise.
That's really what it comes down to. Like, I'm not one of the people who takes every opportunity to dunk on Jamal Adams. Like, I think that he can add a lot to your defense. And there are times where you're watching the game and it's very clear that what they ask him to do, he is the piece to do what they ask him to do for the most part. But I mean, he's obviously not Earl Thomas, and they don't have the corner talent that they had when they had Cam Chancellor and the rest of the Legion of Boom either. And there's no one DB, especially if you're not like a number one true island style corner. It's really difficult for any defensive back to paper over all of the other holes that they have. And they also don't have they don't have the same kind of pass rush either. So, on every level of defense, basically, there's been some atrophy. So I think that they are trying to cover for it as much as you can with your scheme. It's just a matter of, dude, you got to have good players if you want to win at the highest level. And I don't think they have enough good defensive players right now.
There's an offensive play that every team is running against the Seahawks, and I'll try and describe it here as much as I can. So teams will go trips, so 3 receivers to one side. The outside most wide receiver is running like a 5-yard in route. He's just the last read in the progression. The innermost of the 3 is running just a right away shallow cross, a drag route across the field, and then the innermost slot back is running kind of a diagonal, like across the field, like an over route, but it's really just a straight line. And they can't cover it. They can't cover it in cover 3. This whole concept is built to beat cover 3. It's built to create a high-low on the weak hook player, basically the weak linebacker. And they can't cover it in cover 3. They can't cover it when they VAR zone. They can't cover it in cover 2. And every team that they play against runs it, and they get yards no matter what. And that's like, it's both like a, they're trying to mess around with their scheme a bit, and then also just not having very good players has just been a problem for that defense. Sidney Jones had a rough one against the Rams the other night. All right, so let's flip over then. They are going to play against the Big Ben-led Pittsburgh Steelers, who run a high school offense. Like, sorry, this is what it's come to. They are in the shotgun the third most amount of times. The shotgun, the third highest rate in the league with Big Ben. The 2 teams in front of them are Philadelphia and Kansas City, but those 2 teams are option teams. So you want to be in the shotgun, right? So like that makes sense. With Ben, it's really just a way for them to not have Ben go under center because he doesn't want to. That's what I'm thinking. He doesn't want to go under center because when you look at the offensive coordinator that they promoted this past offseason, Matt Canada, what he's done in college throughout his stops at LSU, at Maryland, at NC State, at I think there's another school, Pittsburgh, like Pittsburgh Panthers, not the Steelers. Like, he wants to go under center. He wants to show you all these motions that you've never seen in your whole life. I mean, back to back. This guy's going this way, then he comes back, and he comes back, then he comes back. And then an offensive tackle is shifting from left tackle to right tackle, right? And they actually did this in the last game against the Broncos, but they don't do it. They rarely do it. That's what Matt Canada wants to do, and just create so much eye candy, so much confusion on the defense that you can just have a base run. And we kind of talked about this with the Bengals on Monday. You could just have a base run, and it goes because there's so much chaos behind or pre-snap. They don't motion at all. They live in the gun. They have tells like you would not believe from the gun, and that's the thing. So like if you're gonna be an option team, you can from the gun. You can kind of smooth over some of those tells that you inherently have from the gun because you're reading players and you're okay. You're reading the RPO game, in the run game, run option game, whatever. They don't have those tells because they're not, they run some RPOs, they do, but they're not like a read ops. They're not like a zone read type of team, counter read type of team with Ben Roethlisberger. So, hey, guess what? If the tight end is to the side of the running back, it's zone away from the tight end. It's zone weak. If the tight end is across, it's split zone. If the tight end is to the side of the running back, they run counter. It's like that's it. So they've kind of, and they actually, what was interesting is week 1 against, I don't even remember who they played week 1. They showed against the Bills, they showed some same side counter, which is the ability to be like, okay, yes, you think that every time the back is lined up on one side, we're going to run across the face of the quarterback. We're not going to do that. Here's our same side counter play that's going to mess you guys up. They ran it 3 times against the Bills. Haven't seen it since. So the tells are pretty wild with this team, to tell you the truth. Like that's why I call it a high school offense. It can work if Ben is just unbelievable and the offensive line is unbelievable. We haven't seen that yet this year. So you start there with a run game that is not good, even though they drafted Najee Harris, who's a really good running back. It's not good because of all the tells, and there's no jet motion, there's no this, there's no under center. They refuse to do it. And then the passing game is super basic because Ben won't stick around in the pocket. So what you end up with is throws to the outside. So RPO throws one-on-one. If one of his, if they go 3-by-1 and there's an isolated receiver, here's an RPO throw, speed out 6 yards to the sideline to that isolated receiver. That's it. And then the passing game is just who can I get a guy who wins a one-on-one deep route? And they're lucky in the same way that the Bengals are, that the Bengals having Jamar Chase this year, the Steelers have Chase Claypool who can go up and make those one-on-one plays because okay, so they're getting a couple plays and they actually hit Claypool in the seam against the Broncos in a good win for them. But you can't create real offense with Big Ben throwing it and them just not wanting anything to do with the middle of the field, which he used to be great at. Like, this is potentially a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he just doesn't want anything to do with the middle of the field. So what ends up happening is, unlike a guy like Russell Wilson, who we'll talk about, who doesn't want to do anything with like the intermediate middle of the field, Russ will still take a post shot for a touchdown because he'll stand around in the pocket. And when you have a post route and an over route and this and whatever, you got to stand around the pocket and wait around for that post route to get open. With Ben, he doesn't want to wait around for that post route to get open, so he's just throwing these one-on-one 9 routes on the sideline. And again, they're getting a little lucky because Claypool is such a good player, but that's not good offense. And man, it's shocking how much, to a certain degree, Ben has neutered the Matt Canada offense that a lot of people liked when he was in college. So I don't know. It's just like, it's rough watching this team.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the Packers game, I want to say last week when I was doing my likes and dislikes. And the one thing that was clear was like every single third down, Green Bay just got into cover one, and like their post safety really wasn't even covering the post. Like, you just sit, because why would you? Who's threatening the post in this offense? So yeah, to your point, all those throws being thrown outside the numbers are all underneath. He did throw a touchdown basically on a heave to Deontay Johnson. I think, we've seen some clips of him just throwing the ball up to Chase Claypool every once in a while. So, I mean, it really is just like a spray and pray, type of offense in the passing game. And it's because they can't do anything on first down. Like you said,
oh my goodness,
it's all in the gun. Their RPOs, like you said, they're not reading anything. It's those access RPOs. Like, is a corner press or is a corner off? If the corner's off, we'll throw the speed out. If the corner's pressed, then we're handing the ball off. Like, that's it. And for that reason, I mean, the Seahawks don't blow me away defensively, but it's not like the Steelers are doing anything to put any pressure on you. It's just a matter of, does their freak athlete receiving core make the plays when Ben throws the ball up? And
now you have Juju out for the season.
Exactly. And I wouldn't be surprised. Like one of the things that the Seahawks actually do really well is get into those like 5-down bear looks and start picking and twisting guys to create pressure. And Ben has not handled pressure very well this season. I mean, he's just too slow really to handle pressure well. And he doesn't have a strong enough arm to throw the ball, anywhere else except for his checkdowns if he's being pressured. So I would expect, if I were Pete Carroll, I would want to send a whole bunch of pressure on Sunday night.
Yeah, and then you can and then with the Steelers, it's like, hey, that's exactly what I do. I would send pressure, I play cover one like you're talking about the Packers doing, and say, beat us on the outside. Like, we don't think you can beat us enough times on the outside to have us get out of this type of structure, and we're going to blitz you, and we're gonna get pressure. Now, the offensive line did play really good against the Broncos, but this is, and maybe this is who they are going forward. I don't know, but they haven't shown that they can do it consistently over the course of a season. And so again, you're in these rough spots on second down because you tried to run the ball on 1st and 10, and like I said, you have all these tells, and it's just like, it's rough. All right, let's flip over to Seahawks offense when the Seahawks have the ball versus the Steelers defense. Watching the Steelers defense, is this still that same blitzing cover one? Have they stayed true to their blueprint this season?
Basically, I mean, Keith Butler is very old school 3-4. He wants to play with the odd front, and run his typical fire zones, play cover one, play cover three behind it, and then get into nickel. So you get into the 4-down because that's what every 3-4 team has done for the last 30 years is you get in the nickel, you go into your little 4-2-5 set. And the same idea, you're blitzing, away from the tight end. So you're blitzing the nickel, dropping the edge defender on the side of the tight end, and you're playing cover one or cover three behind it. The one thing that I will say that they're doing a little bit more often now, and I think that this is helped by the fact that they have Melvin Ingram, and apparently they see Melvin Ingram as a guy that you can do more than one thing with. So they'll lift him off of the line of scrimmage, and you'll see him kind of walking around in between defensive linemen and linebackers. And he's basically being used as like that fourth rusher, but instead of, your old school 4-3 where you got your edge defenders running these ridiculous looping stunts and twists, they're basically just having him fire almost as a blitzer, as a linebacker, and running all the slants behind it.
It's like Clowney, Jadeveon Clowney.
Exactly.
Used to do that all the time. And that's a same 3-4 structure with
exactly
there. Exactly. And then using him in the same way. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. But what about do that and play cover two behind it? So that's really it. They're cover three and cover one if it's a mix down, so first and second down, or there's a distance where they still feel like they have to respect the run game. But in the passing game, they're either going to blitz you and play cover one, or they'll run their version of a simulated pressure or creeper and rotate into cover two. And when they're in dime, and this is something we talked about when they play Buffalo, when they're in dime and they have an additional safety type, then they can do some different things in terms of their cover two rotations. But for the most part, man, they're going to play regular old cover two behind it.
And I would say like their cover two snaps this year are inflated by that Buffalo game where it was a specific game plan to play against Josh Allen. What about Minka? What are your thoughts on Minka so far this year? I know there's certain places on the internet that say he doesn't grade very well, and certain other places on the internet that says he's a very good safety. Where do you fall on that?
I mean, I still love the way that he plays. The only criticism I've had is the criticism I had when he wanted to leave Miami, which is that I feel like he's just capable of doing more than he's being asked to do. And he adds a ton of value as a middle of field safety. Do not get me wrong. He's plenty athletic. He's got great range. He can play the ball well. But, maybe this is just me being biased by my own experiences watching what he was at Alabama. But I feel like they can get to so much more within the defense if he was willing to play closer to the line of scrimmage at times. But I like the way he plays. It's just, to your point, I mean, I don't think that it's difficult, I think, if you're not like an Earl Thomas where you're always ranging from the middle of the field out to the sideline, to grade out, magnificently as a middle of field safety all the time. But he plays it okay. I just want to see him do more. And I understand why they don't ask him to do more. Probably for the same reason they don't ask TJ Watt to do more, even though I think he could do more. It's if you got a guy with a very special skill set, the ability to play the middle of the field is hard to do. Same way that the ability to rush the passer is hard to do. So if you have a guy who can do it, I understand the logic in saying that you'll ask everybody else to do all the other things in between. But I do wish that we saw him do a little bit more because I feel like it would be a better reflection of his total skill set. How do you feel about him as a player, at least this year?
No, I agree, and I think that he does a really good job of closing windows when he does spin underneath and getting underneath and understanding route concepts and
forcing
like when they
quarterbacks
use him
to
as a
hold on to
robber.
the ball. Yeah,
like when they use him as a robber, like in their dime stuff, or they're playing cover one with him in the hole, like he got a bunch.
Baker threw him the ball for a pick six last year.
I was going to say Lamar
spot,
threw a pick six, off of those types of looks. So it's there. I just wish that they did it more, and I guess that kind of goes back to the point of like Keith Butler just being very tried and true with the way that he wants to approach defense.
I think it's just crazy to me that like the Steelers have just been doing, with cosmetic changes or minor changes, they've been running the same defense for so long. That's a cool thing. I mean, I don't care if it works or doesn't to a certain degree. I just think it's a cool thing that they're doing that. Okay, so let's move on to when the Seahawks have the ball. So we are getting the Geno Smith game on Sunday night, but I think we can still go back and talk about this whole idea of who controls the offense. The quarterback, the offensive coordinator, is there something, the head coach, et cetera, et cetera. And we just kind of talked about it with Big Ben. And I think that's why it's interesting to still talk about the Russell Wilson offense, quote unquote. So Matt Canada runs this very specific offense. You put Big Ben there behind center, and you run the Big Ben offense. You run the Ben Roethlisberger offense. That's what he wants to do. And like certainly he's a veteran player and stuff like that. Same with Russell Wilson. Now they've gone through Bevel, they've gone through Schottenheimer, and now they have Waldron as their offensive coordinator coming from the McVay system. But at the end of the day, Russell Wilson is going to do whatever Russell Wilson does. And that's not throw over the middle of the field, that's scramble around, that's like the concepts that he likes. And so that's what you saw the first 5 weeks of the season is the passing game was stick routes. Well, the passing game forever has been stick routes because those are quick outbreaking routes. That's what Russ wants in the quick game. He doesn't want routes that come over the middle of the field. He doesn't want the Cooper Kupp slant over the middle of the field on an option route. So they're running the stick route. They've added, which I think is cool, and we kind of talked about this a few weeks ago, this little stick swirl route with DK Metcalf to get an isolated throw over the middle of the field. But really, so you look at it and you're like, what's really different about this offense? The other thing is they haven't changed offensive line coaches. Paul Solari is still the offensive line coach. So I'm going back, I'm watching this tape. I see Trap, and I see Trap again. And I'm like, I don't see no Trap in Sean McVay's offense. But what I have seen Trap is in this Paul Solari offensive run scheme for 3 years or 4 years since he's been there. Last year they led the league in percentage of trap runs, and trap being you let a defensive lineman through thinking he's clean to the quarterback, and then you got a backside guard or tackle to pull and crack him and kick him out. So that's trap. But anyways, so they're doing that, and I'm watching it, and Sean McVay, outside zone, wide zone. Well, Schottenheimer was doing that last year too with Paul Solari. So I don't know how much. Now, I think there's been a little bit more eye candy, whether it's orbit motion, whether it's jet motion. And they've been giving the jet quite a few times, a couple to like Eskridge, their rookie receiver. So I think that maybe has been a little bit more. But really, it's the Seahawks run game that it's been for a while, weak side zone. A lot of weak side zone, and with those trap. And now from the gun, that's another thing. It's like now they go in the gun. Well, you have Russell Wilson in the gun, so you can run GT counter read. So it's like you're not doing that with Jared Goff in the McVay system. So it's still a very Seahawks offense. The only thing that I'm like, I see some McVay in it is the play action game, which is very important. But here's the funny thing. So they run this play that the Rams used to run, where you're really getting an over route over the middle by the slot, or I guess could be by the wideout, but usually by the slot. And he just is at 18 yards, he's just slamming on the brakes right over the middle of the field. And Jared Goff, I swear, in Seattle, I picture him hitting this route in games prior when he was with the Rams. So they've brought this to the Seattle offense. This route is open every time they call it. Let me ask you a question. Do you think Russell Wilson has thrown that route ever?
I don't think he's ever thrown that route in his life.
But here's the crazy thing. So that they'll get that route open, and it's a big play over the middle of the field. And what does Russ do? He refuses to throw it, and he throws a deep comeback on the money for a 25-yard gain. And that's Russell Wilson. Like, you're not going to change him at this stage in time. However, he's so accurate. He's still a great scrambler. He can still throw these moonball deep shots. Like, he's still this unbelievable player. So I think there's some micro stuff that will change, maybe with run pass splits, maybe with certain things. But at the end of the day, there's no such thing as the Brian Schottenheimer Seahawks offense or the Scott Waldron Seahawks offense. It is always the Russell Wilson offense. And then, you have 20 snaps of Geno Smith coming in, and I swear to God, there's so much routes over the middle of the field. Now you're looking at it and saying, oh, this kind of looks like some of the Ram stuff. Here's a little pick, and they get a rub over the middle. Here's a through route over the middle of the field. So I was like, I think that's really interesting because now you take Russell Wilson out of it, and now maybe we can see the McVay kind of offense there in Seattle with Geno Smith.
I think, something that I wrote about right before the season started that I expected I maybe would see more of with Russ would be him embracing working out of empty and showing an ability to do so. And there have been some good reps, but for the most part, I do have to give it to you. I think, you were right. And, our friend Griff, See Mike Spin Move on Twitter was also right that, that's just not his deal. And it's not really even a matter of capability. It's just not his thing. Working at an empty is just not something that he's really comfortable with. And you can see he misses on throws in empty that I feel like I never see him miss when he's just like in regular gun. So I don't know what that is. I think a part of it as well is the fact that their offensive line is probably not the most talented in the world. They're not the best rushing offense in the world either. So, they just don't work. They don't work. To your point, they don't work the same way that the Rams did, when Waldron was there. So a lot of the things that I thought we'd maybe see, little pieces here and there of that offense, it's just not that. And the calls that are being made that you would say are the McVay calls, there's stuff that Russ has been running since Schottenheimer was there because everybody in the NFL runs it, So to your point, it's still the Russell Wilson offense. And a veteran quarterback like this, you bring in an offensive coordinator who's not like some big, force of personality or, doesn't have they're not walking in saying, I am the offense. This offense is my thing. I'm not that shocked now, I guess, as we get closer to the midseason point that it's much closer to what Wilson is comfortable with than anything else.
And another thing was you talk about this McVay concept is the drift strike concept that we've talked a bit about, where it's just easy play action, hard play action, and then you have one receiver running a 12-yard in-breaking route. And it's just it's cover one, it's cover three, we check to it, fake the handoffs, quarterback spins around, bang, fires it in. You're seeing, Goff threw a ton of them. Stafford's doing it this year. Throw that out of the offense. That's not, they've run it a few times and Russ has thrown one of them. He threw one to DK, which is really nice, but for the most part, this is not what not what Russ wants. So this is what you're going to get. And then with that said, they're still really good. He graded super highly before the injury. He's still, this is not to say that Russell Wilson is this useless quarterback. He's great. He's a fantastic player. He's always been a fantastic player, but the whole narrative around, they're going to change the offense, blah, 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 it was probably never true, especially from a macro perspective. All right. We're going to get into your article for this week, your likes and dislikes this week. Before we do, if you want to go and read Deontay's likes and dislikes article, plus my Bengals article, plus Deontay's Georgia defense article, which we'll talk about later, go to pff.com, and right now you can get 25% off any PFF subscription using the promo code TWOHIGH. That's TWOHIGH. So 25% off any PFF subscription, which means you can read mine and Deontay's locked article content. You can go to PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboard. So grade-powered projections, cover probabilities, and betting values. 0 to 100 grades of every single player, including the top rookies on every team. Player prop tool, which shows positive and negative value for every NFL prop, and much, much more. So support the pod and use promo code TWOHIGH, TWOHIGH, for 25% off any sub. Okay, so first thing we want to talk about is the huge comeback by Lamar Jackson. on Monday Night Football against the absolutely fucking useless Colts defense. I love Lamar, but I had to put in that the Colts defense is suspect.
No, I mean, they deserve to be slandered at every opportunity.
So yeah, anyways, what did you see out of Lamar in that game?
I mean, the same thing that I've seen from him since he was at Louisville. You know, I guess that people have, because the narratives around Lamar have gotten so strong now, people are so dug in. I think it makes people act as though things that have very obviously been there from the beginning somehow were never there or only just recently showed up. Like, one of the things that he's always done well is work through his progressions.
Almost to a fault sometimes.
Yes, it's almost too much. Like, I think he does too much trying to work through
Justin Fields style.
Yes, and like, if there was a criticism to make, and it's something that I noted in my post, like, the one thing that I will say is his feet aren't always the cleanest as he works through progression. So you'll see times where his feet or his hips are not turned, in conjunction with his shoulders. And I do think that will cost him some velocity. Now, he's typically able to make up for it with all these different arm angles, so he's able to get the ball out in ways, and he is a wrist thrower, so I think he's still able to kind of make up for, maximum velocity by just getting a functional amount of it. But what you saw against the Colts is exactly what I always expect to see from Lamar when he has clean pockets, which is an ability to work through progressions, get the ball where it needs to get to. The one thing that I will credit him for, that I will give him a lot of credit for, was his ability to adjust, from the first half to the second half. Like, it was pretty clear in the first half. The idea was they're going to try to run the ball downhill, set up all these play action shots, try to get the ball in those intermediate areas with those crossing routes, your sail concepts where you're running, that 10 to 12 yard out along the sideline. That was clearly what they walked in with. And then when it was obvious that, based on the flow of the game, that the only way they were going to get back in it was with straight drop back stuff, that he was able to handle that and understood that he didn't have to try to push the ball down the field and get it all back at once. The throw to Hollywood Brown up the sideline, that was obviously great work with his eyes, being patient and waiting for that double move to come open. But for the most part, like, his average up to target was below 6 yards in the second half, basically. That's all, just dumping the ball off and letting his wide receivers go get the yards after the catch. So the more that he progresses and shows that that's what he's capable of doing in the drop back game, as these guys get healthy, we've beat the drum on this, but when I want to see Rashad Bateman in this offense so much. If this is the Sammy Watkins that Lamar's going to get, if this is the Hollywood Brown that he's going to get, if Mark Andrews is carrying over what he was in 2020 to this year, you add another receiver like a Rashad Bateman, to make those intermediate areas of the field a threat for defenses. I'm really excited to see what he does as a drop back quarterback. I knew he was capable of it. I just would never have imagined, because of all the injuries and the lack of the dominant running game from their running backs, at least, that he would just be able to pick up as, a straight 40 drop back a game type of guy and be able to handle his business like this.
So I'm premiering a new kind of global take here.
Okay.
Premiering. I kind of said it last week when we talked about the Gavin Escobar-led Dallas Cowboys. But so I'm looking at all these offenses, the good ones, and I'm feeling like, can you be two offenses? Can you be good running two different offenses? So we talked about it with the Bills too. The Bills can be like, hey, we can go super spread, we can win all these one-on-ones, and we can move the football. Or like they did against Kansas City, they can say, hey, we can run the quarterback, we can go under center play action, we can run it with a fullback on the field, and we can win games that way. So Dallas, the same thing. Dallas can go 11 personnel with all those great receivers, but they can also put those two tight ends on the field and run the football. And so it's like, can you be two good offenses? And the Ravens on Monday night played a ton of 11 personnel, which is crazy to me because that means the MVP of the league, Patrick Ricard, is not on the field. However,
I love that this podcast has become so pro fullback between Juszczyk and Ricard.
Yeah, the three. I mean, look, I'll talk about my three favorite fullbacks in the league: Patrick Ricard, Kyle Juszczyk, and Cooper Kupp. So, like, I'm anyway, so what I saw that the Ravens were able to do, and I looked at some stats after, was play in 11 personnel. play spread. So we know that they can get into heavy sets and run the football and run play action and move the ball that way. But the issue has always been the same. Like, okay, well, now you're, can you spread it out and be consistent in 11 personnel? Lamar is, since week 1, so after the Raiders game, Lamar is the highest graded quarterback in 11 personnel. Only player over 90. And then I'm just looking at it right now. Lamar in 2019 in 11 personnel, 68.6 passing grade. Lamar in 11 personnel in 2020, 64.1 passing grade. Lamar in 11 personnel 2021, 87.5 passing grade. So if that continues, you are seeing a great offense, honestly. And that's exactly what you're talking about. You're seeing this evolution for him to be just unbelievable player. Because you always, you can always get back into putting Ricard on the field, putting another tight end on the field, running all that escort motion that we talked about, and running the football with the option game. But now, if you can go spread and win some one-on-ones, and again, the Colts defense is perfect place to try it out. A, they're not good, and B, they're going to give you some soft ass zone coverage, and you're going to be able to say, hey, let me sit in the pocket, let me pick who I'm going to throw to. So I'm super impressed by Lamar so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, that was the more that, to your point, the more that we see him do that, the easier it is for them to live in two worlds, and that's a really difficult thing to do. The Rams with Jared Goff tried to do the same thing, right? But they had to gimmick out their offense so much to make it work. Go empty, quick game every time they needed to pass. But if you can actually just sit in regular old 11 personnel and ask your quarterback to work through, these complicated progressions, and I still don't like the way that they designed their passing game.
Yeah,
the fact that he can work through that, that says a lot about where Lamar is at right now, and he's clearly dialed all the way in.
He threw a backside dig to Hollywood Brown in, I think, the fourth
Sure
quarter.
Did.
They had like a scissors type concept to the front side, 3 receivers, didn't like it. One of those things where, okay, the 2 deeper routes, like it was a post and a corner route, didn't like it. The flat route is open there, but do we want flat routes, or do we want to move our eyes back to the backside and hit a 12-yard or 15-yard dig route? We want a fucking dig route. And that was a really nice throw to Hollywood.
And it was perfect timing, too.
Great timing, right as he's coming out of the break, able to catch it in stride, and then Hollywood does the Hollywood thing, puts on the brake, spins out, and gets an extra 6-7 yards. So that was that was my favorite play from Lamar on Monday night. All right, next we're talking about Davante Adams, who I can't get enough of this guy. I got to watch him in person against the Bengals on Sunday afternoon. And you wrote about basically, how do you cover this guy? How do you cover this guy? Do you have any answers? How do you cover this guy?
I don't, especially if they're able to do what they did on Sunday, which is use him differently than how they typically do throughout the year. So one of the things, that I've joked with our friend Justice Mosqueda about is that I call Davante Adams their speed back. So, that's basically what they do. It's all the bubble screens, the now screens. It's a glorified punt return every time, basically is what it is. But to go against the Bengals, knowing that they like to play a lot of split safety stuff against outside zone teams, outside zone play action teams, and to say, well, okay, Davante, no more bubble screens for you then. What we're actually going to do is run you on posts and digs, and to be able to do that seamlessly, it shows a skill set in Davante Adams that we really only see a handful of times throughout the year, typically, right? You usually get your 1 or 2 games, it feels like it's always in prime time, where he's running 9s and posts and the deep comebacks, when they feel like they have a one-on-one that, that they can't guard Adams with. But to see him be used as the coverage buster was really impressive. His 3 highest graded routes were the over routes, dig routes, and posts, all the things that you want to get to crush quarters and cover 2, and that's exactly what they used him for. So that's really what I walked away most impressed with.
Well, and I'll keep using this theory whenever I have a chance to, but Packers are another good example of being able to run 2 different offenses.
Yes.
They go shotgun, and they run, their shotgun RPO bubble screen type of offense.
True spread offense.
I'll call it it's a high school offense, but in a good way. Unlike what I just talked about with the Steelers, and then they can go under center and they can run that wide zone system and be super good at it. And then you play action with Rodgers. It's unbelievable. And yeah, you know, one thing that I've noticed teams are doing this year, you talk about bubble screens to receivers or now screens or whatever, tunnel screens, whatever, smoke. They're going one receiver, so like isolated on the backside or something, and the one receiver is bubbling. And there's no blocking. Like it's not like a bubble screen. It's just a bubble route. Right. And against the Saints, Davante Adams caught one and then made two guys miss, and there's 8 yards. Like I don't even know.
It's a glorified punt return. It's really just a glorified punt return.
All right. Before we get into the next topic, the Two Highs podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps you advance your money moves. Buying your first home, planning to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow. Western and Southern's playbook. I lost my train of thought. Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. Team up to identify your needs and address your goals with a game plan built just pour toi. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. All right, next on the list, Kyle Pitts. Finally, the Kyle Pitts breakout game that we've been waiting to see. What did you see when you turned on the film for the Atlanta Falcons in London?
I mean, I guess all it really takes to get Kyle Pitts to be used the way that he's supposed to be used is for two receivers to get hurt before the game. Yeah. But I will say, you know, to be fair to Arthur Smith, learning tight end in the NFL is a lot, especially the way that you're used as a tight end in the NFL. So I understand kind of slow walking him through, but it was nice to see that he spent more snaps in the slot than he did as an inline tight end, and he spent more snaps outside as a true wide receiver than he spent as an inline tight end. And what that does, you know, I think that we've talked about this before. It's using one personnel grouping to make different personnel groups formations, right? Like that's a huge key in the NFL. If you have a tight end, you know, we talk about this with Travis Kelce. We talk about this with George Kittle, with Mark Andrews, et cetera, et cetera. The best tight ends in the NFL are able to take, you know, 11 or 12 personnel and turn it into what you would typically see with true wide receivers on the field. And they're just using them basically to just box out DBs across the middle of the field, you know, for crossing routes. You saw the arches concept or the F short post concept, where he gets to get a defensive back, you know, on his back and box that guy out and make a play with this great catching radius. You can use him as an outside receiver. They had him on like a cut split, run play action. The guy runs a post, you know, over the middle of the field behind the safety. There's nobody home. He gets another big reception off of that. So it's not just that he can actually line up out there, but you can create explosive offense, which I think is the thing that Falcons fans have been beating the door on, you know, since he's been there, that we haven't seen enough of.
I agree. There you go. I got nothing else to say. I didn't watch that game. I actually watched Zach Wilson on the other side of the ball, and let me tell you something, it ain't good. That's all I have.
Good, man.
That's all I have to say about that.
We'll have to have that conversation at a certain point in the season, but it's not good right now, guys.
He's dirting screen pass. He's throwing screen passes off his offensive line's back. He's dirting bubbles. It's c'est pas bon, as we say in French. Let's get into something that I think is really interesting that you wrote about with regards to the Cleveland Browns running game, and that is, so now we're living in a world where there's two high safeties, especially you're playing against the Brandon Staley-led Los Angeles Chargers, two high safeties. Now, they're not always going to play quarters or cover two with two high safeties. They're going to rotate down. They're going to spin a safety down into the box to try and mitigate stuff late. You know what I mean? What did the Browns do to deal with the late spinning safeties?
So what the Browns did well, and it's something that you want to do no matter if you're any kind of outside zone running team, whether you're the Browns or not, you want to try to identify where the safety rotation is coming from, because if you're an outside zone team, it's a perimeter run, right? So, and if you're spinning a safety versus a perimeter run, your safety, if he comes down to the side that the run is being sent to, where the point of attack is at, he'll be an unblocked defender because the offensive lineman cannot account for him within the blocking scheme. So offensively, you're kind of playing a guessing game.
And they can't account for him because he's lined up at 12 yards.
Right, he's coming from depth.
He's coming from depth on the snap or just a little before the snap.
Right. So, and that's one of the reasons why you want to play split safety, right? Is so that way you keep a guy at depth against all this outside zone stuff. So that way offensive linemen can't account for him. But it is kind of a guessing game, right? And this is one of the reasons why the Shanahan guys and others, Kubiak and all these guys who run a lot of outside zone were able to tear up, the advent of cover three. And that's why that coaching tree has proliferated so much in this era, is because if you live in a world where you just want to show your rotation, and there's no way to mix it up, they can always just figure out where the unblockable defender is, and we'll just run the ball the other way, and then after we beat you over the head with that, then we'll run play actions, and then we're really going to be wasting your defenders to the play side and then running these crossing routes coming back opposite. It was a great look at the difference between when you do guess right and when you don't. So I have a clip of when they do run the ball away from Derwin James rotating down, you get 7-8 yards because the other safety's going to the middle of the field before Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunter even contacted. Then you have a clip of when they guess wrong, and now you got the safety rolling down, and it was quarters, not cover three, but quarters is weak side rotation, meaning that the safety on the weak side is the one who's involved in the run fit. So he comes down, he can't be accounted for, he blows up the play right at the line of scrimmage because no offensive lineman can get up to him. And then there's an explosive run, best case scenario when you guess right, that weak side safety has to try to come all the way over to the play side to make a tackle. He misses, and now there's nobody else home to make a tackle, and you get a touchdown that way. So that's kind of, those little game within a game types of things, being able to recognize as a coach, are we getting cover three? Are we getting cover four? Are we getting cover two? Where are the safeties coming from? What is the run support that we're dealing with? So that way we can make sure that we design our run game to avoid those guys. It was, just a great lesson in that. And then obviously it helps, even when you call it wrong and you run the ball into the safety rotation, you've got these two bowling balls in the backfield who can make guys miss anyways. Think of the 230 yards they had, 87% came after contact. That's a ridiculous rate.
Yeah, this was like, with all that said, and obviously this is such an important part to this new world of defense that we're living in, the offense versus defense we're living in. That's not a good matchup for the Chargers defense.
It's just not, yeah.
Interior offensive line versus their interior defensive line, it's not good at all.
Yeah,
it's not good at all. All right, it is football season. Right, we're in week 7 of the college football world. It's football season, and you know what that means? It means we're going for 2 here with the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped. Blitzing through hairs has never been easier, and it's time for you to join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code PFF at manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping. It's 3 and out the window with all the trimmers. Now go tame that Wildcat offense. The brand new Lawnmower 4.0 is here to take your defense to the next level. This 4th generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin safe technology. The Lawnmower 4.0 has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction on off switch that can engage a travel lock, and gives you the ability to turn on the 4000K LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave. That I mentioned, this trimmer is waterproof too. Oh my God. Rain, snow, or sleet are no match for the waterproof power of 4.0. There's no 15-yard penalty for this clipping. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code PFF at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com if you use promo code PFF. All right, as we get into a short little segment on college football, I, of course, have to remind you that Home Field Apparel is a premium collegiate clothing brand out of Indianapolis, Indiana. Incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. Home Field is in the middle of Big New Saturday Season 2, where they launch a new school collection every Saturday at noon for 16 straight weeks. Use promo code PFF to get 50% off your first purchase at homefieldapparel.com. Promo code PFF for 50% off your first purchase at homefieldapparel.com. And if you go on homefieldapparel.com, you're going to find a beautiful collection of Georgia Bulldogs merchandise. Speaking of the Georgia Bulldogs, Diante, we've been talking about them for quite a while because they're putting together truly one of the best defenses of all time.
Like ever. Yeah, literally ever.
In the PFF college football era, it is the best defense. It's the best It is going to be the best defense, but right now it is the best pass defense in EPA per play by like an unbelievable amount.
Wide margin.
It's so wide. They're at negative 0.544 EPA per play. That's like almost half a point
I was
per
going to
play.
say, if you pass the ball on them, they're literally turning you into the worst offense that's ever existed.
It's ludicrous. So so we've been kind of talking through this defense, and you finally wrote the article about it. So tell me what you found about the Georgia defense.
So the thing I really wanted to center on, Georgia, Kirby Smart coming from the Nick Saban tree, like we can say the obvious. They run every defense imaginable. Like that part is true, right? But one thing that I really wanted to center it on is something that we've talked about, with Dave Miranda and Todd Orlando and all these different 3-4 guys. Marcus Freeman comes up in these conversations as well, which is using the odd front mentality as a way to attack the spread, not just to sit still, play base defense, but to find different ways to attack the spread in a way that in the RPO era isn't going to cost you easy throws over your head. And what they've come to is what a lot of, these 3-4 guys have. They just happen to have more 5 stars than anybody else on the planet, and that's running these simulated pressures and creepers. Where you're firing and blitzing these linebackers. We talked about how you want to take care of zone that way, getting your linebacker across the center's face and slanting your lineman to create movement, create all this lateral movement on the offensive line. You'll see them, bring a guy off an edge and slant. So, and a lot of it really, if you look at it the right way, a lot of it really is a way to play nickel, but fit the run like you're in base. So to get an extra body in the box. So that way you don't always have to play a gap for gap. That's the most impressive thing. They're not high. They're not necessarily high in TFLs. I think they rank like 31st in FBS, which is a good number, but not as high as you would think in terms of run defense.
The run defense I think is like 22nd in EPA per play.
That's all.
It's obviously, like you said, it's very good, but
right.
You would think it's like top 5.
You would think, right? You would think, when we're talking about one of the best defenses we've ever seen, that they would be at a ridiculous rate stopping the run. But really, what that does for them is it protects them against early down passes.
Yep.
It's not so much about stopping the run as much as it is being able to defend the run in a way that's not going to expose you against early down passes. They're still a cover 3 team. It's just a matter of, instead of just doing your regular old rotations, strong and weak, sky rotations, you're playing these creepers behind them, which allows you to spin safeties in a bunch of different directions. So it can look like quarters until after the ball is snapped. Not just on the snap, oh, here comes the safety out the sky coming down over the slot. But after the snap, I'm ready to pass. Oh, wait, the safety that was 12 yards deep is now in a buzz rotation, meaning that he's rotating down into the box. Or I thought it was cover 3, but they held their disguise so long, and now it's actually like this cover 2 look, where it's true zone, and their corners are trapping the flats. And it makes it really difficult to find those easy access throws that a lot of college offenses are looking to live off of now to stay efficient. And then that leads into what they do on third down, which I'm sure you're going to lead me to, and that's just simulating pressure. So you get into 3rd and 7, you get into 3rd and 8, and now they're walking all these bodies up to the line of scrimmage. They're manipulating the protection because, just like in the NFL and college, you only got so many different ways that you set your protection. Almost everybody, because you're in spread,
Alabama
is a
only
half
has one way to
slide
do
team.
it, so.
Yep, and yeah, we saw how that
They have
went.
more ways. That was a joke. They have more ways.
But yeah, everybody's a half slide team, so you walk everybody up in one way, to make them slide in that direction, and then you try to manufacture these free runners. And the beauty of it is with the simulated pressures, let's say that you don't get the exact slide on the protection. You only invested 4 in the rush, right? You're not sending 5 or 6 and trying to bank on getting this unblocked rusher every time. Even if you don't get home, you're still dropping guys out in the coverage. So you can still get underneath these throws, force a quarterback to pat the ball, maybe you get a coverage sack. And if you do get an unblocked defender rushing the quarterback, now you force a hot throw where you're dropping out in the coverage. So you're able to kind of trap the throw the same way you would in like the old school fire zones and trap zones that you would see, from a few eras ago, which are really the pressures that Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, the guys off this tree kind of, quote unquote, grew up with. It's just another way to adapt to be able to deal with the spread. You can't always rush 5 if the offense has got 4 or 5 guys out in the route. You're stretched a little thin. So it's just a great way to manufacture pressure while also staying safe in coverage.
So this whole idea of simulated pressures reminds me of a conversation that comes up like every offseason in the football world, which is, hey, why are running backs protecting? Like, why are we forcing running backs? We got to get running backs out in the pad in every play. Like that, then you know what I mean? Like, we can throw to them, we can do this, they can do that, blah, blah, blah. And I think these simulated pressures, the issue is always the same, where they're going to pressure you, but they can still trap your hot throw, and you need to be able to protect it and then throw into whatever zone coverage they're playing, because they're still only rushing 4 a lot of times. And that's defensive coordinators have become so good at finding your weakness in protection, blitzing the shit out of it, but they're not playing fire zone. So there's not these same holes that you're going to get. So like just setting the running back out, you're getting a free rusher. You have no secondary, protection player to deal with that. You're in empty, so you have all these issues that you're going to have in empty. So you're looking for the hot route, but it's not there because they have 7 guys in coverage. And that's like that conversation that always happens, where it's like, yeah, it worked. It works with Patrick Mahomes. It works with 2019 LSU Joe Burrow, but it just can't work with everybody. And then it's kind of like, well, if you also have Patrick Mahomes and you have 2019 Burrow, then you can do whatever the hell you want anyway. So like, I think that's the conversation that always plays in, whether we should release backs and stuff. But defensive coordinators have done such a good job of creating pressure with creating free rushers while still only sending 4 guys.
Right. So it makes those calls to release the back a really risky proposition, right? Like, you don't know. You cannot guarantee that your slide is going to pick up the four or 5 most dangerous rushers.
Yeah. Well, especially if we're talking about a world where people are talking about, well, for the most part, we're going to release 5 every play. Like then yeah. Obviously, I'm not saying never release 5. I'm just saying if you live in this world where you're always going to release 5, you're going to have problems with these type of pressures.
Exactly. And the last thing, the last point I want to make is what I kind of closed my post with, which is that, when we talk about defense, we often talk about these innovations that happen on offense, and we say like, oh, well, that just beats this defense, and we just kind of wash our hands with it. But what Georgia and a lot of these 3-4 guys are doing with these creepers and simulated pressures, it's just a defensive version of the RPO. That's all that it is, right? We're saying, hey, if we can get a play in the backfield, awesome. But if we can't, we're going to make sure that we're still standing tall in coverage. And that's all. That's really all that you're seeing. 4-3 teams, it's difficult. It's much more difficult for these 4-3 teams to be able to do that, because having 2 true edge rushers, on the line of scrimmage makes it more difficult. But when we talk about like gaming the front, running these stunts and twists, you're not necessarily blitzing a guy, but it's the same idea, right? It's saying we don't want to have to blitz in order to get in the backfield, but if we can stunt the front or run a twist, or slant and get a TFL with one of our 4 down guys, awesome. But if it's a pass, hey, we're still safe in coverage. Maybe we can slant and get into the hole of the protection, get the back on a backer, or get the back on a defensive lineman. Awesome. But if we don't get there, we've only invested 4. That to me is a huge key in what this is. It's just early down defense. It's a new way to look at playing early down defense. And then the simulated pressures, obviously, it helps to not have to send 5, to be able to get after the quarterback. You can still play regular old zone coverage, and then you can do what all these all these Tuscaloosa, Alabama guys off this tree do, which is play this man-match quarter stuff and this man-match cover 2 stuff. And then, best of luck trying to figure out where the pressure is or isn't coming from, and then what space you have available to throw into. So I would expect, we'll get a good look at them versus Kentucky, and then I know everybody's going to be waiting for, the game between the hedges with Florida, and I think that Florida game, that's really what I'm going to be beating the drum on if they perform well again. I'm already picking them to win a national title, but if they handle the next 2, it's going to be, I'm going to be kind of ready to close the book on it.
All right. Well, there you go. This was the Too High podcast featuring myself, Seth Galina, and Diante Lee. I got nothing else to say. I'm footballed out. Let's
Same.
we'll talk to you guys next week. See ya.